Carol Kornacki's story is breathtaking, heart-wrenching, and a perfect example of God's grace and redemption. Raised in an abusive family, sexually abused at the age of 8, a heroin addict in her early 20s. By the time she was 21, she'd been pregnant 3 times. She had several abortions, practiced witchcraft, sold her soul to the devil, was diagnosed with hepatitis B, and told she was going to die. But she is here today, alive and well, because of Jesus and his saving grace. She's the author of the book, A Soul for Sale, A True Story. It is an honor to interview you, Carol, and have you here today. Thank you for coming.
Your opening is incredible. It covers just about everything and reminds me how powerful the story is.
Do you ever sit back and just think, how am I still here?
All the time. It chokes me up all the time. I look in the mirror and I think, to think that someone could go through all that and be able to tell the story repetitively, global television, personal appearances, and one-on-one in prisons and rehabs, and let people know Jesus can do it. It's not just Jesus can do it. Jesus can do it.
You are proof that Jesus has done it and continues to do it. You know, I think about your book and I think it's a perfect story for a movie. I think one day somebody needs to tell your story in a film, because you grew up in a household where you said your mother never told you that she loved you. She never showed you affection. How did that impact you and affect you?
I think we all need human touch, and it seemed whenever there was a human touch in the family, it left a mark on me. I remember as a child, I had black and blue marks all over me most of the time as a result of either having done something that was unacceptable, or maybe there was a drunken spree, or maybe it was something that I didn't please. And never hearing I love you in spite of that abuse was very, very painful. And you know, things bury. They get way down deep and root themselves. And so you start looking for love in all the wrong places.
At 8 years old, you're sexually abused by someone, a man in the neighborhood.
Yes.
I mean, your childhood was a challenge. And to see that God continued, you know, you say in the book, at times you felt like you were abandoned by God, or you wondered where God was. What was your relationship with God at that point?
There wasn't any. I lived in a home of extreme alcoholism. I lived in a home of abuse. My dad was mentally ill. He went in for an operation. They gave him an anesthetic. He never came out the same. That turned into a mess at home. My mother was having children one after another after another. She didn't know how to love. She didn't know where her reference point of love was. So there was a lot of abuse, a lot of brokenness, a lot of violence. I remember, Maggie, waking up in the middle of the night and there was blood on the walls. There were dishes broken all over the house. I remember as a little girl, there was droppings from mice and rats in the food because they ran rampant in our house on Elk Street. So growing up in a home where there's violence, abuse, brokenness, alcoholism, mental illness, you get this feeling like, where are you, God? When I'm eating out of a garbage can, where are you, God? When this stranger is doing this to me, this evil to me, where are you, God? And I was afraid to say anything. Who was I going to tell that I was being sexually abused? If it was even brought up, I felt dirty. So I'm bearing no love. I'm bearing violence, mockery at school. We children felt terrible when we went to school. They laughed at us. We were the Thompsons. We had head lice. We didn't eat. We had a crazy dad. We had a nutty mother. So I was growing up with all of this going on in my life. And one day when I was about 11 years old, I had just been sick with hepatitis. And it was hepatitis A. And I had gotten it because I was a bedwetter, and as a result of my bedwetting, I started drinking water, and you read it in the book, out of some terrible things, commodes, wherever I could get it. And I got hepatitis A. And the hepatitis was so bad that I had to be isolated for 30 days. We didn't go to doctors. My parents didn't have any money. And so when finally the hepatitis A subsided, I was living in all of this. I was becoming promiscuous very young as a teenager. I went to church one day, Maggie, and I looked up at this crucifix. And here was this man hanging on the crucifix, this plaster depiction of this guy, Jesus. Just sat in the church and looked up, and I thought, you're dead. You're dead, Jesus. You can't help me. You're not there when I'm abused or broken or hurt or beaten. You're not there when I'm hungry or lost. You're not there when I'm sick. So I'm selling my soul to the devil. And that's what I said to that depiction. The first one who offers me something better, my soul goes to him. Well, you know how quick the devil comes in.
Yeah. Isolation is a word that you use because, you know, you grew up in a household with a lot of brothers and sisters, but still feeling isolated. And it's a friend named Marilyn who just really just takes you in and loves you and treats you essentially like a sister.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
She was her parents lived nice. She had a nice home, very normal. And when she knew what I was walking through, she said to me one day, let me lend you some clothes. So she began to lend me clothes, let me use them and feed me because I was always hungry. We were always hungry. And she fed me and just loved me. And then I told her about the sexual abuse and she loved me and cared about me and said, it's okay, don't feel dirty or bad. And then one day she got very sick and died. And right after that, Maggie, things started to move quick. I became pregnant before I was out of my teens. I had my first child. I was drinking. I was starting to practice things, witchcraft, and starting to take pills. So the state of New York took my daughter Marilyn from me and put her into a home.
Because you had named your daughter after your friend.
Marilyn that had died, yes. So now Marilyn's in a home. And I get pregnant again. Well, the second time I got pregnant, I had an illegal abortion, and it was horrific. It was terrible. She almost killed me. The third abortion, because I'm still, about 20, 21, not even, I threw myself down a set of stairs in a suicide attempt. So now I'm on this role of carrying all this bitterness and abuse and brokenness. I hated my family. My dad died. I was glad. So I went out into the world, went to New York City, to St. Mark's Place, which is the worst place you ever want to go, and landed up shooting heroin. And from that time, when I returned back to the Buffalo area, I was a full-blown heroin drug addict, shooting drugs and stealing and lying and doing things I'm ashamed of today because of the addiction. And people don't understand. People say, I have a son who's doing drugs and he's stealing from me. Well, of course, when you're on heroin or any drug and you're being manipulated and controlled by that chemical, you don't, Maggie, you don't think about, oh, I shouldn't steal that ring from her, or that's mom's favorite necklace. You just take it. So I became all that, this person who was lost in drug addiction. And for that time, after the needle came out of my arm, I was okay for a couple of hours, but then I'd return to the craziness and the brokenness and the memories and the dirty feeling. So they put me in a mental institution because of my behavior. I landed up in Meyer Memorial K Ward. They put me behind a metal door. And finally, after 30 days of isolation, and you're right, isolation's a really good word. I was always hiding out. After I got out of there, I went even crazier, Maggie. More drugs. Then I get into witchcraft, started to practice witchcraft. Then I began to go out into the world and do whatever I had to do to get those drugs.
And you're having outer body experiences when you're practicing your witchcraft. You are you're delving into this world.
Yes.
And at one point, you actually sell your soul to the devil.
It was on Halloween. It was right around the Halloween time that people were celebrating it, and I had this demonic, evil, dark encounter with what appeared to be a demonic force. And I said then, you own me. You have me. And that's when I became suicidal. See, people think the devil's cool. You know, kids think the devil's cool and Satanism is cool and all this stuff is really cool until you get into it. And I was casting spells and I was, you know, doing all kinds of witchcraft and getting all kinds of tree hugging and all kinds of incantations and having out-of-body experiences, which is called astral projection. And with all of this now, add that, Maggie, to how I was living, an addict, on the streets, homeless, in and out of mental institution. People wouldn't even open the door when I'd come knocking, Maggie. They're like, don't open up, she's a crazy person. And they would all say, Maggie, she's gonna die. She's gonna die. Carol Kornacki will take her life, or she's gonna overdose, or she's gonna land up in jail or a mental institution. So I thought, oh well, I might as well get married now. Maybe that'll make things better. So I got married, and he was an addict as well, and somewhere in the marriage, we were both shooting up, and it was terrible, Maggie, just a terrible life. And I became pregnant, and I came to him and said, we're gonna have a baby. And he said, I'm not having no baby, get rid of it. Maggie, the day that I had that child aborted out of my body, so much of me died. It chokes me up to this day. So much of me died.
Even though you had had abortions before?
Yes.
Why? What was that? What was different about that?
I hoped this baby, I could love something. I had no love. I'd never been loved as a child. drugs and promiscuity and witchcraft and things that I included
deep
were my
down
love.
in your heart, you really wanted to have that normal life.
Yes, I did. I wanted to be loved. And when he said no about the child, that's when I started loading guns and putting them to my head and in my mouth and trying to kill myself. I drove cars into lakes, buildings, telephone poles, just this crazy darkness came over me, and I would just drive and hit a telephone pole. I almost killed. And when I hit the telephone pole, when I went to get the car, the guy said to me, so the person in the car died? It was at the demolition. They took it on a flatbed. They couldn't even tow it. And I said, no, I'm her. And he said, you should thank God you're alive. And I thought, God, where's he?
Wow.
One day working at a bar, stealing, shooting up in the bathroom, a woman approached me. Her name was Linda. And she said, Carol, I know if I can introduce you to a man named Jesus Christ, he'll be different than any other man you've ever known. She talked real to me. She didn't come with all the flowery Christianized statements. She came with an openness. She offered me a hope and love. And she said, everybody knows you're dying. Those dark circles under your eyes, you're so involved in the occult.
And you'd been diagnosed with Hep B by that time?
Absolutely. I was in cirrhosis, and I think I had cirrhosis at 21 years old. That's young. Wow. Yeah, real. They said you're in cirrhosis.
Like the doctors had said, basically had called your husband Richard and said, she's gonna die.
That's exactly what they did. They said they told him to keep me out of their offices. I was violent. I was hard to deal with. Keep her out of it. We don't even want her in our office. And so with all of that, I thought, she said to me, you want to go to church? And I thought, go to church? I ain't going to church. And she finally said, try it. You've tried the rest. Try something else. Very nonchalant. Maggie, I did. I went that day and sat down in the pew, and you could see those spirits. They were all over me, honey, just this whole shaking and the dark black under my eyes and the needle marks up and down my arm and the hatred. In fact, I have pictures I just put on Facebook, and people are like, oh my gosh, that was you. Amazing. And they said at the end that if you had sickness in your body, come up, we're going to pray for you. And I sat there with all that shaking, and to this day, people remember it, shaking. And she reached out and said, come on, I'll take you. And she took my hand and led me to the front. 2,000 people stood to their feet and began to pray for a demon-possessed, drug addict, street walking, broken, dying witch. 2,000 people who didn't know my first name in a church began to say to God, touch her. And he did. He came down with such an incredible power that it went through my body, went into my liver, began to do reconstruction. I had peptic bleeding ulcers, reconstruction in my mind. Spirits began to just go left and right out of me. And people think, really? Really?
Carol, you said on that stage, you said, I want to feel I want to know what love feels like. And at that moment, you felt something that you say was Jesus.
I really believe it was. I was laying on the floor of the church, just lying there under this incredible, amazing power. And I heard something say, not so much audibly, honey, but inside of me and throughout me and in the atmosphere, Carol, my name is Jesus Christ, and if you're looking for love, you found it. I love you just the way you are. And there I laid on the floor, just a little girl who had done all these things, abused, broken, beaten, thrown away, abortions, witchcraft, guns in my mouth, drug addiction. Just imagine what kind of love that is.
Oh.
Imagine to love somebody like I just described me, and I'm very blunt. Imagine someone loving you. When I get up off that floor for the first time in my life, love I never found in a bar, in a bed, in a book, in witchcraft, in a drug, in a mama, in a dad, I found lying on the floor of the church when Jesus Christ said to me, I won't change your life. And as I walked off the platform, I heard the speaker say, you will never be the same. And I have never been the same. I completely stopped doing drugs. I never went back, never touched another drug, never touched another drink. I was healed of hepatitis B. I was healed of peptic bleeding ulcers. All those ugly, dark forces left me, and I'm filled now with God's love, and I'm telling everybody who will listen that God loves you.